Hello. A lot of what I have been doing lately, and what I probably will be doing for the next few days, is giving recollections of things that I've read while I was in Japan. Because when I was there, I was not really able to make any videos, or I was not really able to kind of catalog my opinions on certain things that I was reading. And for those who've never really seen the intro video for my channel, it is specifically something that is beneficial for me is what I do it, because in the process of articulating what I feel about a certain topic or a certain piece of art or literature that I engage with, I am able to, again, more refined, in a more refined manner. I can catalog the inherently ephemeral nature of my opinions on things, because it's going to be tied to when it came out, the video. And it's very interesting and useful for me, because in the future, if ever I want to revisit these texts, I can look back on some of the videos and I can see what I thought about it. And I think it's very interesting. Again, it's very useful for me, and I find the process of articulating very beneficial for just my understanding of the text as well. But anyway, so Confucius, Analects is what I read. One of the first few books I read when I was in Japan. I brought it with me. And for those who are unfamiliar with Confucius, Confucius is, I guess, the progenitor of the Confucianist tradition. And it's a tradition that was very influential in Asia for several centuries. And Confucius was, I don't remember, well, so he was probably born sometime maybe 500, 600, 700 BC or so. And so the book is very fascinating, actually, in its construction, because it's not actually something written by Confucius. It's a collection of his sayings. So Confucius was someone who would he was an advisor to different people of high political power, maybe military generals or heads of states, and he was someone who was known to be full of wisdom, and he would go to them and speak to them and give them advice. And he had his own set of disciples of sorts who wanted to learn under him, and this is a book of his disciples kind of remembering some of the things he said and writing it down on paper. So in a sense, it's inherently something that will probably not, it's not going to be something from his own writing, but it's because I don't think he actually wrote. But it's very fascinating, I think, to read. It's most similar, I think, I just thought about this earlier. It's similar. It's most similar to, I'm not sure, in Christianity, there's a thing called so in biblical scholarship there is an idea of that the synoptic gospels, or the gospels of Mark, Luke, and Matthew, those three are called the synoptic gospels, because they kind of recount, they're very similar to each other, is why they're called that. And they in biblical scholarship, it is theorized that they were extrapolated from a source Q, and source Q is called the sort of the book of sayings of Jesus. Apparently, they speculate there must be some kind of book of sayings where they kind of just pulled out quotes or something or whatever, and that's how they kind of have so much similarities between the three. And this source Q is, I guess, most similar to what we'd see in this the Analects. So it's like a collection of sayings that Confucius said. I'm not sure exactly how it was compiled, how they ordered the things out, but it was mostly compiled by his disciples, where they, the philosophy. So I've been trying to stray away from using the word religion, because again, if some people use it, I don't think it's that useful in talking about Confucianism, because it's, in many ways, it's very imminent maybe in its nature. It's not necessarily about going to different planes or something like that. But some people call it a religion, some people call it a philosophy. I don't think it's that interesting to kind of delineate what it actually is, but in general, it was some guy who had lots of wisdom, and people took to it, and it ended up going through. It started in China, and then it got brought to Korea and Japan, and in various ways it influenced not only their idea of how to be perhaps a good person, and also influenced just how certain sudden empires were founded and constructed and ruled. It would not really make sense for me to be able to kind of summarize what the book is about, but in general, what struck me the most, I guess, is it's one of these things where it's about someone who's trying to find a way to make people feel that they are acting in a manner that is to be strived towards, if that made any sense. There's a sense of the ideal situation of how one should be, and then he gives kind of sayings on how one should get there, and why one should get there, and what are the things that are important. Maybe Confucius seem to create some kind of hierarchical value system of things that were of utmost importance according to him, and for many people, at the time at least, and even up to today, it's very influential. But it had a very commonsensical nature to it, so it took to people very easily. And reading it today, just a couple of thousand years after it was compiled, a lot of it still kind of holds up in the degree that it still tackles a lot of the issues that we think about today. I mean, when will we ever really stop thinking about how to be a better human being? And what is maybe popular with the Confucianist tradition is this idea of the sage. So there's this sagehood is kind of the ideal situation where you want to be a sage, and Confucius himself was not someone who what I like very much about reading the book is that he doesn't put himself in a position of utmost virtue. Sorry about the light; it's sun is weird, but he doesn't say that he is the person who has to be followed in terms of his like what I'm trying to say. He doesn't say that he is the example that everyone should follow and be like him. He looks to other people and he says, for example, that he's not a sage and he'll probably never be a sage, but he looks to other people in society and says, well, this guy seems to be closer to being a sage than I am, and he doesn't assign a lot of inherent. Again, he doesn't seem like while he seems to be making the rules, or at least projecting the rules, he doesn't seem to actually see himself as better or worse than the average person. Although there's some interesting things about the book also that fascinated me. There is a sense of elitism in the way it's written. So what I mean by that is that what I mean by the elitism is that he writes about the common people, as like a distinct category of people apart from those who are kind of able to maybe form higher level ideas about things and engage with certain philosophical ideas. And it's not really a view that I thought I would be able to kind of see in such kind of an early state of sorts. But this kind of, I don't want to even use the word elitism, but there's a sense of like a hierarchy of perhaps who are the people who are better suitable to become a sage. Maybe the commoners can't be sages inherently because they are in their status commoners and they just are not able to kind of have higher level order ideas of thinking about the world. I thought it was interesting. A lot of it is about giving reverence. I guess reverence is a good word for this. A lot of it is giving reverence and respect to people, focusing on yourself and not on others, and not in the selfish way that kind of came out as, but in a sense that you want to be able to improve yourself before you kind of impose things on others. A lot of it is about self-discovery, and to the degree that you want to. I guess that's not even a good way to describe it. I guess. Because Confucianism is also, you can actually look at it as like it's communitarian. Maybe it's not about you, it's about the wider society, that you have to kind of play your role to some degree. But also there is a sense in which you want to, self-improve. I guess improvement, like self-improve to some degree, at least in his case, to the direction of sagehood. And also there are many. I use the word sage a lot, but there are actually many other words that he uses for different kind of categories of. Types of, I guess, better versions of what you are currently now, and it's interesting again, like he does mention heavens and stuff, but it's never used as, it's like the immanent nature of the tradition is meant to make this life better and make this world this world a better kind of place. There's not place, but like situation as opposed to kind of prepping yourself up for like for the afterlife, which I think is interesting. I don't remember, at least in this book, I don't remember reading anything about an afterlife, so I'm not sure exactly what the Confucianist tradition kind of leads towards. But Confucianism was also kind of very adopted heavily by Jesuits, and because they found the Confucianist ideals of how to be a good person, I guess, incompatible with Christianity. And that's a very unique situation where they went to China and Japan and they fell in love with Confucianism, and they kind of incorporated it with their brand of interpretation of Catholicism. I'm sure there are many things I can talk about, but those are the things that most fascinated me, I guess, at the time. I don't remember much of the book in terms of specific quotes, but it's very fascinating. They call him the master. He's always it sounds very self-referential to read, but it's interesting. A lot of it is about, again, how to treat other people, how to respect people, how to respect government, how to respect marriage, how to respect. A lot of his, he kind of gives ways to show to I guess to achieve the state of stagehood, which is not a transcendent state but an immanent state. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed reading it. A lot of it was very, a lot of these old philosophical treatises, I guess, or not even treatises, but just these writings from people that kind of stand the test of time, stood the test of time. When you read them, there's a very commonsensical nature to a lot of it, where it feels very relevant, and I guess that is why many people took to them. And I was reading it, and it was kind of inspiring. Some of it was very inspiring to read. Just the nature of the people, the nature of Confucius himself. Like, he's kind of shrouded in mystery, but from the perspectives of other people, he seemed to be a very fascinating person. And if he even existed, not that I want to throw that conspiracy theory into it, but it's hard to tell when with things like this. It's hard to tell whether the figures that certain movements surround, especially when they don't have any specific writings of their own name. It's hard to tell how much of them are actually there, or have actually been there. But it's cool. It's also it's slightly it's very much there's when I read it, there's a lot of like specificities of the specific war leaders, and there seem to be lots of references to different leaders at the time of different states, and like how they're comparing the different leaders of states. And so a lot of the things that kind of flew over my head because I had no knowledge of anything during the period. But some of the things that some of the more thematic things kind of stood out to me and kept with me, and I did enjoy reading the book quite a bit. So yes, that's what I read recently. I really enjoyed it, and if you're interested in Chinese religions, or just not even say I don't use the word religion, but if you're interested in Chinese history, I guess Asian history, Confucius is a good place to start in terms of just wonder if you're curious about how maybe certain countries in Asia were influenced in their thoughts philosophically. This is a good thing to read to just get a better sense of what things people seem to care more about. For example, filial piety is a big thing here, where maybe you don't get that as much in. I don't actually know, but in some of the Western philosophy I've read, Western philosophy, I don't really see that much filial piety. But it's like in here it's like utmost importance. You can't honor your father and mother. Well, I guess you kind of have that in the Bible as well. Anyway, I'm just going on and on. It's a long video. I'll stop now. But that's what I thought about this book.